computer and share screen. All right, yes, I believe I'm recording now. Okay, so make a new project in TouchDesigner. Where's my, there we go. Mine's loading, I guess. It always takes forever when I'm screen recording. All right, this is going to be exciting, and this is going to run really slow because even when I wasn't screen recording, I had to down res to 720 by 720, and it still wasn't running at 60 frames a second in performance mode. Because this is kind of a really processor intensive or graphical intensive thing that we're going to do, but it's really cool. All right, so this is based off of a YouTube video that I will post the link to on the website. So if you get really confused by my version, you can check out his version. He goes really, really, really fast though. So get ready to pause it and like, what the heck did he just do? Hey, Evan, mute. Somebody, whoever is feeding back. Make sure you're muted unless you're going to talk. All right. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build the render pipeline before we start putting objects. So let's do that. So start with a render top. All right, and it's going to get mad because it doesn't know what it's rendering yet, but just ignore it. And then we're going to, coming out of the render, we're going to put a Luma blur. This is going to, when we're done, this is going to create kind of a tilt shift effect. Luma blur. And for now, just bypass that by clicking the bypass arrow. Let me get rid of my palette. I don't use the palette. All right, Luma blur. And coming into this Luma blur, we're going to be controlling the Luma blur has two inputs. One is the signal and one is the source that controls that Luma blur. And we're going to use a ramp top to create a signal that will control that Luma blur. And for now, just bypass that ramp because we're not actually going to use this until we're done. All right, then we're going to pass it through a level, which will we can use to adjust the brightness of everything. And then we will pass that through a transform. And on the transform, actually, oh, I forgot. Let's start with this. On the render here, this is where we're going to specify the resolution. And so you click on the common tab, and the maximum resolution you can render on the free version is 1280 by 1280. And that's what I did originally, because this is going to end up being kind of a square video. So I started with 1280 by 1280, and then it just got really difficult to deal with. So I'm going to just render at 720 by 720. Okay, and then on the transform over here, we want to, down here where it says comp over background color, turn that on. And let's see, what else was there? And then, oh, on the background color here, just change this last one, which is the alpha, change that to 1. So now you should see a black square on your transform. And then let's send this to a null. And call this null BG for background. And if you want to, actually, you go ahead and do it. Click this display flag, and that'll put what's being rendered in the background. So we're going to kind of patch on top of what the output will be. And we'll see how the frame rate does. I have a feeling it's going to be really bad because of my screen recording. All right, so now let's actually create something to render. And we're going to start with a tube SOP. Tube, which will create a cylinder, as you can see, right? And we're going to, first of all, let's make the viewer active and then click W to bring up a wireframe. So we're going to be working with we're going to change this tube to actually not make it a tube and make it like a circular flat plane. And to do that, we can just change the height to 0 over here. Height 0, and this first radius, change that to 0 as well. And now you can see it should have created this kind of spider web structure. Okay? And we want to send that to an attribute create to be able to compute normals and tangents. Remember we did this with the blobby sphere to actually give the blobby sphere some definition. And then we're going to send that to a geometry comp. And the easiest way to do that, instead of just double clicking out here and making a geometry comp, if you right click the output of this and go create a geometry comp, then it won't stick that stupid torus in there. It'll just put what you have in there. And right now you can't see anything because we're looking at this edge on and it has 0 height. But you'll be able to see it here in a second when we add a camera, and we need to add a camera and a light. So add a camera, comp, add a light. All right, and well, here I can, for now we can just, let's just rotate this a little bit so we can see it. So here on the rotate of the tube, set that to like, I don't know, -15 degrees. Didn't that make it show up? What am I missing? I know it should be there. Well, let's try this. On the, oh, camera. Let's see here. What do I have on my camera? What am I doing wrong here? All right, well, there we go. If you drag this light and kind of drag it up, make a viewer active and drag it around like that, you'll be able to see what you'll be able to see eventually. I don't know why we're not being able to see this by rotating it, because that should make it viewable.
Jackson, I rotated my camera and I see it now.
Yeah, so rotating your camera. There we go. Yeah, so I moved the camera, but that put some weird, okay. Well, that's a place to start anyway. And for now, let's actually create a look at target for this camera. So make a null comp. And on the camera, you want to specify the null comp as your look at. And now this null comp will sit at 0, 0, 0. So the camera will always be looking at 0, 0, 0. And let's see. What we want to do actually here is, let me reset this camera. I'm going to go to right click on the camera and say reset all parameters. Oh, but that got rid of the look at. Let me drag the look at back in there. And what are you mad about now? Unable to calculate because it's sitting right at 0, 0, 0. So let's move this up to like 3. What? Why? You should be able to see it now. Darn it. The up vector is likely parallel to the look at direction. Should be looking straight down. Well, whatever. Just do that for now, I guess. Okay. Let me take a look. Do I have this in my notes about what the camera settings should be? No, I don't. All right. Well, wait a second. Yes, I do. Okay, great. So yeah, it should be at like translate. This should be like a 3. Yeah. And why can't these be 0? There. Okay, that's what I thought it should have been able to do. I don't know why it wasn't working before. What if I put all these back to 0? Oh, that's when it breaks. Okay. All right. Just put a 15 in that rotate for now or something. I don't know what this is doing. Oh, that breaks it too. Okay, never mind. This will fix itself in a second, I'm pretty sure. But for now, just make your viewer active and on your camera and just drag it till you can see the 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 circle. All right. We're actually going to make this kind of spin around, and we're going to do it by making the camera spin around, which is a little bit different than making the object spin around because we get lighting from all those different angles. And we're going to make the camera spin around, not just spin around, but like orbit around. And we're going to do that with some LFO objects. So create an LFO over here, an LFO chop. Okay, and I'm going to rename this channel on the channel tab for this. I'm going to rename this Cam X because this will be the camera's X translate coordinate. And then we're going to attach that to a math to do some ranging. And go ahead and say on your range here, change the from range from 0 to 1 to from -1 to 1, and make the output range from -4 to 4. Okay? And then send that to a null chop. And let's just name this null chop cam X. Okay, and now copy all of these, copy all 3 of these, and paste it right below. And we want to change this from channel name from cam X to cam Z. And then change the name of this null from cam X1 to cam Z. Now, what we want to do is actually have these synchronized. Right now, they're not synchronized because we didn't paste it in at exactly when it should have started. But you can synchronize them pretty easily just by selecting one of the LFOs and then hold down Shift and select the other LFO. And that will actually control whatever we have in the parameters window. Whatever we have selected, if they're the same object, it'll control all of those parameters on all of the objects that you have selected simultaneously. So if I go over here back to the LFO tab and click on pulse on this reset, that should synchronize them. And that was one thing he just kind of skipped over in the on the YouTube link, which threw me for a major loop. I was like, wait, how did he get them to synchronize like that? Okay, so now that they're synchronized, we want to actually change the phase of this LFO too, so that it's slightly offset to create a circular pattern. We want it to be phased by 0.25. And just for good measure, let's synchronize these one more time just to make sure. All right, and so this will actually create a circular pattern on this camera. So now on your camera, on the translate here, go ahead and put this Y coordinate as 3 for now, and then make your viewer active on cam X and cam Z, and drag in translate X to this thing and say chop reference, and drag this one to cam Z and say chop reference. And why is it wobbly? Do we still have a rotation on it? Yeah, we do. So it's wobbly because we have it offset by 30 degrees. If I change this back to 0, it should look. No, it's not. Why? Ugh. It shouldn't be wobbly, but it is. I'm wondering if it's this other stuff. Let me change these back to. Let me look at my notes again. Okay, on this pivot, change this last one to -10, and then change these to 0, and then change this rotate to 0, 0, 0. There we go. That's the way it should look. Okay, so I guess this was the value that I didn't highlight in my notes. So the translate should be this, cam x, a hard value of 3 on the y, and the cam z of being sent to the translate z, tz, and then these rotate should all be zeros. Scale can just be left at 1, 1, 1, and then pivot should be 0, 0, -10. And if you scroll in, it might be, whoops, not too far, but it might be hard to see, but you can see that these axes on this cam 1 are spinning around. In fact, let's slow this down. So on frequency here, where it's set to 1, let's change the frequency to like 0.03. We want this to like spin really slowly, 0.03. And that's going to make it go crazy because now they're not synchronized anymore. Frequency 0.03. And then click on both of these again to resynchronize them. Click pulse, and now resynchronize them. And now if I zoom in, you should be able to see that that if you can see the axes on this cam 1, you can see that it's rotating very slowly. And this rotation will be way more evident here in a minute when we actually start doing our bump mapping and height mapping and stuff. Questions so far? All right, cool. Next, we are going to add a texture to this geometry. So let's add a Fong down here below your Geo 1. And on this Fong, we don't want it to have any specular, so click on the specular and drag this value down to 0, or just click the black button here. That'll turn off the specular. And let's see, was there any other weird Fong things I got to do? I don't think yet. I think the rest of that's fine for now. Okay, and go ahead and drag that onto Geo 1 and say you want that to be param material. Okay, so not a lot has changed yet, but it will as soon as we start adding stuff. All right, so the next thing we want to do is actually add our pictures, or add our height maps. And we're going to get that from some pictures. We could also get it from a webcam. You could probably generate it from scratch with some noise or something like that. But for now, let's grab a picture because it's kind of cool. So where the heck, get out of the way. I'm going to go to Chrome, and I'm going to go to, actually, before we do anything, let's save this just in case something crashes, because things are about to get more intense. And I'm going to call this, what are we, week 13? Zoom meeting. All right. All right, so go to Chrome or your web browser, and there's some really cool like pictures of landscapes that have a lot of texture from them that come from Google Earth, and there's a website that's collected those called Earth earthview.withgoogle.com, earthview.withgoogle.com. So click on that, and it'll just bring up a picture. Oh, well, it brings up a splash page, and then you say Explore Images, and it'll give you these cool kind of pictures. And if you use your arrow keys back and forth, you can scroll through them and find some that you like that have some interesting textures to them. Let me see if I can find some cool ones. Ooh, I like that. I'm gonna try this one. So then, once you find one you like, if you click, whoops, make sure you don't click on this sit back mode. There we go. So if you hover up by the top, you should be able to find a download button. And let me just find like 2 or 3 that you were like, ooh, that's kind of cool. Let's try that. And maybe find one with a lot of like artificial, like streets type textures. That one would be good. This, like this, maybe. Because then you can kind of see the difference between natural shapes and more geometric shapes. All right, so now that you've downloaded some of those, it doesn't matter what pictures you choose, just whatever you think is interesting. Then go ahead and open your Finder, find where they got downloaded, probably in your downloads folder. And select those pictures and just drag them into your Touch. And it'll probably put them all 3 on top of each other, but you can just move them to see them. There we go. And it's giving you a warning that's talking about the maximum resolution of TouchDesigner. Don't worry about that. We're going to be scaling these down. Plus, we're already only rendering at 720 by 720. All right. Does everybody have pictures? Does anybody need me to wait a minute? Going once. All right. I'm going to go ahead and keep going. Just stop me if you need me to stop. All right. So the next thing we want to do is put a fit. I think that's right. Yeah. Fit top. Pick one of your pictures. Actually, just go ahead and make a fit top, which will like rescale this image and change this fit best to fit outside. And here on the common, resolution 1000 by 1000. Let's change that to 1024. I don't think it really matters. It's not that much difference. 1024 by 1024, and then pass in one of those images that you think looks cool. Okay? Then we're going to create some different paths for this image to go. So first of all, create a null coming out of this by right-clicking on the output and selecting null. And then go ahead and make another null coming out of that one, which is weird right now, but it'll make more sense in a minute. And then coming out then coming out of this first null, right-click the output and create a normal normal map. And go ahead and it can connect to that null. That's fine. Then right-click the output again, and this time go to oh, you know what it is just make another. Disconnect this from the normal map and connect it back to here. So the image by itself is what we're going to use as the height map. So in here, type in height map, Height, capital M-A-P, height map. And then on the outside, on the output of this normal map operator, make another null chop and name this one normal map. Normal map. Okay, so now we have this height map, we have this normal map. Now, in our Fong over here, this is where it's going to get really cool. You can see where it says normal map, bump. Drag the norm, make the, do you need to, no, you don't need to make it active. Just drag that onto, from normal map onto the normal map thing. And if you look really closely, you should see that your image has a little bit of like texture to it now. We can make that much more apparent by changing this bump scale to like 30. And see that texture? Now, to make it even more dramatic, we're going to add height map. So click on enable height map. And then drag the picture here that we have set as height map, drag that into height map. And click on displace vertices where it says off, turn that on, and maybe drag down the displace scale a little bit. And you can see that it's actually pushing those vertices out on their normals and creating a interesting like landscape, right? Yeah. So let's take a second and let's look at what this looks like in performance mode. So if you go into performance mode right now, you won't see anything because we need to either put an output on this, or there's another way you can do it. So just hop out of your project one by zooming back until you pop out of it. And you could put an output because the container, if you go to the container project one look, it's looking for out one. But if you change this to just BG, you don't even need an output. Now it's looking at BG. And also, if you go to the common, is it common? Maybe it's look, maybe it's panel, maybe it's layout. Layout, you go to layout, where it's doing 1280 by 720. We're rendering it at 720 by 720. So I'm just going to set this to 720 by 720. And that'll create a square screen. And if I go into render mode, you can see what we've done so far, which is this kind of warped tortilla. But it gets better. That's cool, but it gets even better. All right, try some of the other, go back into your project one and try some of the other pictures. And you can see how that changes things. Try the one that has angular streets if you did one with angular streets, which makes it look completely different. You know what I think it is? Why there's not a lot of detail here is I forgot. Here on your tube, so this is kind of cool, but it's like ho-hum. There's not a lot of definition here because the vertices are pushed out on their normals, but there's not that many vertices. So here under your tube, where it says rows and columns, change this to like 200 by 200. Yeah, that's a lot better. And now let's take a look in performance mode. See, and now we have a lot more going on. And now that it looks like this, you may want to adjust your parameters of the displace scale. Maybe something more like 0.15 or 0.2. Yeah, I think that looks better. And check this out. Go ahead and move your light a little bit. So if you make your viewer active on your light and you drag it around, you can get different looks based on where that light is, because you'll get more shadows if you have it at a more oblique angle. Okay. So now this is cool, but it'd be even cooler if these like mountains were kind of pulsing or moving, right? I'm gonna go back to this one. Ooh, I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay, so we're gonna add in some noise to this. And let's add let's see, coming out of the fit, we are going to insert a composite top, and it'll get mad because it wants a second source and we haven't created a second source yet. So let's give it a second source, and we're going to use noise as the second source. And go ahead and patch that into the comp top. And now already this is like changed this a little bit, and you can see what it's done to the composite is it's added all these black areas, which has changed the way the height map works. So basically, the way the height map works is wherever it's black in the image, that's going to be a low area, and wherever it's closer to white is going to be a high area. So this has added a bunch of valleys and mountains to our image. So we want to animate this. So let's see here. Do I need any different? Yeah, we do want a specific resolution as well. We want the resolution to be the same as the fit. So I could type in 1024 by 1024, but let me show you something else that's kind of cool. If I click on this fit here and I right click on the resolution here in parameters, I say copy parameter. Then I can go over to the noise and right click on resolution and say paste reference. And now this will always be, because there's a reference between those, this basically created this reference that so far in the class, a lot of this we've been typing in manually. It just did it automatically for us. So if I change this, this one will automatically change to match it. And so now this has gotten a lot more detailed. And now we just need to animate this noise. So on the noise here, I don't know if you remember from Blobby Sphere, but you can animate the noise by under the translate Z parameter. You can put in a like abs time, abs time dot seconds, and that's going to go really fast. So let's just multiply that by 0.25, and now it animates that noise. And so now we can see we got kind of like a bubbling tortilla over here. And the frame rate is horrible on my machine. And it's about to get even worse. All right, well, one thing I can do to help a little bit is let's select everything. And then on one object, if you do a Command A or Control A to select everything, and then click on Viewer, this icon here, that will set all of these to, they're just like little name things instead of the actual pictures, and that will not render those. It'll still render your output because you told it display active, but it's not rendering those little icons that are in the screen, and that helps on frame rate quite a bit.
Where did you click? It just stopped, so I didn't see.
So you select everything, Command A or Control A if you're on Windows, and then this icon up here, that's Viewer. You click on that.
Got it, thank
So
you.
that'll turn them all on for me, or I can click on it and I'll turn them all off. Okay? Now, let's see. We're almost there. All right, so that's cool. We got a bubbling tortilla. Oh, let's look at some other shapes you could do with this. You don't have to make it a tortilla. You don't have to make it a flat plane like this. You can, if you want to, for example, make a sphere here. And probably on your detail here, you as well want to change this to like 200 by 200. And then pop that into the attribute create instead of the tube. And now it's created this like planet, which is really cool. You'll notice though that you get distortion like at the poles of the planet and kind of at what the like the prime meridian. There's got to be a place in the geometry where the coordinates roll over from 359 back to 0, and so you'll see those that kind of seam in it. But it's hard to actually see. It's right there. But when things are moving like this, it's kind of hard to even notice. Also, so say you wanted something that more resembled the the terrain that you started with, you could create a grid SOP, and also want to set its size, no, not size, but rows from 20 by 20 to something like 200 by 200. And here on orientation, instead of X, Y plane, change that to ZX plane, and then patch that into attribute create. And now it's created like a terrain, a flat terrain. And I could change the size of this to make it bigger. And if you started with like a really specific design, this would make that design really pop out, be recognizable. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and put it back. Let me turn the viewer off on these as well. And let me just bypass the sphere and this as well. And I'm going to put it back on tube. And it's back the tortilla. The magical tortilla. All right. Now, what's next? Next is we're going to do this blurring. It's kind of cool. Kind of creates a tilt shift effect. You guys know what tilt shift is? It's a camera technique where the focal plane, instead of being at one point, is kind of slides across the image or slides vertically across the image. And we can do that with this Luma blur and driving the Luma blur with a ramp. So let's see here. And this is where it's really going to make, once you start adding the blur, let's go ahead and save. Once you start adding the blur, that's where the processing starts to get really intense. Let's start with this ramp here. So leave your Luma blur disabled for now. And on the ramp here, we're going to create a key that goes from from white to black to white again, instead of from black to white. So click on this. Let's insert a key in the middle, actually, by just clicking in the middle of this gradient, which inserts a key. And then on the value for that key, drag that down to black. Then click on this key over here, the starting key, and on its value, change that back up to white. And so now you have a ramp that goes from white to black to white again. And now go ahead and on your Luma blur. Oh, also on this ramp, we want it to be a vertical ramp and not a horizontal ramp. Let me turn on the viewer. This is what we've created right now on this ramp. If I change this from type horizontal to type vertical, then it will rotate it by 90 degrees, which is really what we want. And then go ahead and unbypass your Luma blur. And right now you're not seeing a lot because it's only, you might be able to notice that things are a little tiny bit blurry at the edge, at the front edge, and a little tiny bit blurry on the back edge. We can crank that up by changing this filter width here, white filter width, to like 40. So then it's starting to get really bad frame rate for me. I'm down to 29. But that looks really cool. See how this center section is in focus and everything else is out of focus? I feel like maybe 40 is a little bit too big. I'm going to set that more like 30. Yeah, I like that better. And you can change where that focus band is by dragging this key around, the center key. So the way this works is wherever is white is more blurred. Wherever is black is less blurred. So by creating this ramp that goes from white to black back to white and setting that to vertical, we have blurry up here, no blurry in the middle, and blurry down at the bottom. Yeah, cool. All right. Now we're gonna surround this kind of like as this like spinning galaxy inside of a like an orb. So let's create that orb real quick. Um, so I'm gonna do that by adding down here somewhere. I'm gonna add a new sphere sop. And on the detail on the sphere, let's change this to 200 by 200. Okay. And then we're going to set that to a geometry, send that to a geometry comp, which will completely obliterate everything because it's covering it in a opaque sphere. But that's all right. We're going to fix that in a second. We're going to create a material for this. So create a Fong material. Ugh, I got to move this video. It's in my way. There we go. All right, so a Fong, whoops, that's point sprite. Fong material. And on this Fong material, we're going to first of all change its alpha. Let's also turn off its specular. We don't want any specularity, so set that to black for now. And on its alpha over here, the alpha tab, let's change this down a little bit to like, I don't know, 0.75 or so. Yep. And then set this to the geo as its material. So drag it in there and say param material. And also go back to your Fong. And all you have to do really to make this work correctly is multiply by, no, is that right? No. Why? I thought that was going to work. Make sure your post color by alpha is on. What do I have to do to make this work? Oh, I remember what it is. There's something in here about blending. It's either in the texture or in maybe in the geometry. Enable rim light, no. Shadow deform, common. Blending, transparency, off. Turn that to on. There we go. And I think there's a way to make this a little bit better. One minus source color. Yeah, that's better. So change the destination color to 1 minus source color. And although that's not exactly what I wanted it to look like. 1 minus source alpha. That looks better, I guess. Well, not really. Shoot, this was the part I didn't get in my notes correctly. Well, I'll just try to make this look good, and if we can't figure it out, I'll open up the other version and figure out what this should have been. For now, that's all right, whatever. Let's leave it. And then we can actually change the color of this slightly, which I thought was kind of cool. Go to diffuse here, and then choose like a dark blue color or something. Okay, so that definitely doesn't look the way I had it before, and it has to do with that blending. Which it's got to be, oh, turn depth test off. That's one thing. There we go, that looks better. So you turn off depth test. And what happens if I go back to 1 minus source alpha? No, that's definitely not good. What if I just have this as 1? That's okay. 1 minus source color. That looks the same. Definitely not source color. 1 minus source alpha. No. All right, so I'm going to put this back to 1 minus source color because that looked good to me. Yeah. And now you can also just like, if this is too dark, too obscuring, you can pull the alpha down a little bit if you want. And the more you pull it down, the more transparent it'll be. I think somewhere around there looks kind of cool. So now we have this sphere. We have this galaxy floating inside of this translucent sphere, which is kind of cool. All right, so there's one more thing that we're going to do to make this even cooler, and that's add some like particle effects to this. So we're going to drive these particle effects by the same sphere, or the same type of sphere, but let's just create another one. So just copy and paste this sphere. Once we do that, actually, so this sphere down here is set to 200 rows by 200 columns. This sphere, we're just rendering it as a flat sphere, so it doesn't really need to be that detailed. So the original sphere that we just made, it can be 20 by 20, and it doesn't really matter. This one, though, because we're driving particles from its size, we really want it to be 200 by 200 so that we have more places for these particles to come from. Okay, so then we're going to take the output of this sphere here that has 200 by 200 and right-click and send it to a sort. And change the sort from no change to random. This will make the particles come from multiple different places. I don't know. I think last year I taught this. We went over particles because it was part of the slot machine. Because I had like coins spilling out of the slot when you won, driven by a particle system. But I think I cut that out this year, so we probably never talked about it. But if you went over the asynchronous lesson for this week, he does particle systems as part of the audio reactive lesson, which was the second tutorial that I posted. But basically, the way particles work in TouchDesigner is they have to be driven by a geometry, and the particles emanate from a vertice of some sort. And you can have a single vertice and have all your particles coming from one place, or you can have it driven by a shape so that all your particles come from a specific shape, which is what we're going to do. So we're going to have a particle driven by this sphere. So coming out of the sort, we're going to go to create a particle. And if you look closely, you can see kind of these shimmering particles you're not going to see them rendered yet, but you'll see them in your particle operator. We want these particles to actually be a little bit smaller than the main sphere. So on your sphere size here, radius 1 by 1 by 1. I want that to be 0.75 by 0.75 by 0.75. Now I could type it in. Here's another thing I discovered today. If you click and hold on the word radius and bring up your value ladder, it'll change all three of them at the same time. 0.7 by 0.7, that's pretty good. So let's do it like 0.8 by 0.8. Yeah. All right, so now we have particles, but they're not being rendered yet because we need to send it to a geometry comp so that they can be rendered. So send this to a geometry comp, right-click on the output of your particles, and go to a geometry comp. My frame rate is getting abysmal. All right, for now, I think I'm going to turn off my blur because that will make things a lot better. See how much better frame rate, although I'm screen recording, so I'm not getting a very good frame rate either. All right, so now I got particles flying everywhere out of my sphere. And instead of, on this particle type, instead of render as lines, we want to change this to render as point sprites. Okay? And now we want to actually create the point sprites material for these point sprites to have, because right now they've kind of disappeared. You barely see them at all. Let's create a point sprite material. And set that in your geometry. So you drag it into the geo there and set it as the material. And now your point sprites will get way bigger, easier to see, and you can even change their scale more. So let's see, constant point scale, I believe I can change that up and make them bigger, right? All right. Something like 2, I think, looks good to me. All right, so now I have these like little fireflies coming from my sphere, and I'm gonna just adjust those so that they stay kind of inside the sphere. So I'm gonna go back to my particle system. I'm gonna go to particles, birth. I'm gonna make more of them first of all. Let's make this like 1,000 instead of 100. And we're gonna change their life expectancy to like 2. Wow, why is it so far outside of... I feel like mine wasn't this big before. It stayed inside of the sphere. Not sure what's going on here. So it's got to be driven by this sphere. So my radius is small. It should be less than the other one. Don't understand. Let's try just dragging this down. Okay. No, that's not what I want. 0.67. I don't know. I don't know. Something's different. Something's a little different. I'll try to figure it out here in a minute. It could also be the life expectancy or something.
I
Yeah.
changed life expect to point two, and then it seems like to be inside of it.
All right, let's try that. So part life expectancy, instead of 2, change it to 0.2. Maybe that's what it is. Yes, that's totally what it is. That's why I just didn't see that in my notes. That's exactly it. Thank you. All right, so now we got that. It'd be cool though if these had a little bit more motion to them. So we're gonna add some forces. We're just gonna add some turbulence to them. So if you click on forces and here on turbulence, click on the word turbulence. So you do this to all channels at the same time and drag it down to like 0.6. Not negative, up. Four, five, six. Yeah. And then turbulence period, change this to like 0.05. Yeah, I think that's all we need. All right. And that's basically the whole thing. And let's see, I can turn my blur back on, which will make it look cool again. Let's do that. Yeah, that's really what you want it to look like, right? And so this is kind of a real-time generated thing based on this, input picture. Let's look at some other things we can do with this to make it a little more interactive. One thing you could do, like right now it's pushed by that picture. Something that's really cool to do is like find a picture that has like a regular pattern to it. Like, let's see which one worked the best. I think it was this one. No, this one. Yeah. So like something that has like a pattern. I just got these from Google. I put in the word pattern, searched, and check this out. It's kind of cool. It brings this like recognizable pattern to it. Although with the amount of noise, we're just not seeing it very well. That's kind of cool. So you could create a system that like switch the source images around. Another thing you can do is drive it. This can be driven basically by any image, right? So I could drive it by a camera. So I could use video. Let me save first. This is going to slow things down quite a bit. Video device in. Can I even do that while I'm using that camera? And select my camera from here. Yeah, there I am. And I'm going to go ahead on this common just to try and save a little bit of resources. I'm going to change the output resolution from use input to custom resolution and just change this to 1024 by 1024. And then pass that into the fit. And now this is driven by the camera, which at this frame rate is really hard to tell what's going on, but especially if I were to switch the shape of this to a sphere, there's a whole bunch of stuff you could do. So like, all right, so I'm going to disable this and attach this, and now I have a sphere. And when it rotates around, you can sometimes see your face in it. I don't know. My lighting, I got to adjust my lighting angle to kind of light this up a little bit better. So you can drag your light around, get it from different angles. Well, that's from underneath. I want it from the other way around. I could also like turn off the noise for a minute. So that would probably make it a little bit clearer what's going on. So where is my noise? There it is. That just gets rid of everything, doesn't it? Yeah, that got rid of everything. Maybe if I just bypass the comp. Yeah, there we go. So I'm bypassing the composite now. This, it's kind of like it reminds me of an orange, of like like an orange peel. And if I pointed at my Metropolis poster, you can see like the buildings in the Metropolis poster are reflected in the height map. Come on, rotate around. Right? And then maybe you can see my face. It depends on where the sphere is while it rotates around. There I am. Hello. Right? So that's kind of interactive. You could probably also change this based on, you could change the amount of noise or the intensity of the noise based on the input of a sound, of a microphone. That'd be kind of cool too. But that's really all I wanted to show for today. Um, any questions on this?
Is there a way that to pack like have multiple projects running in one TouchDesigner file at the same time, and then like trigger, say if I want the sphere to show up in my visual, but then I want to trigger it with something, would then be trying to find something to trigger project one?
So you can totally put more than one project here. And as to what gets rendered, it's a good question. I'm pretty sure you can do that. I'm not sure what would control what gets sent to the render window. You could also, so there's different ways. You could have different projects here, and you could probably specify which ones send to the render window, and I'm not sure exactly how to do that right now. I'll get back to you on that. I'm almost positive that that's one main way you could do it. I'm just trying to see if there's anything. Maybe here it's on perform. So this is, okay, yeah. So here we go. So you could use like a button interface or whatever to change this, which project this is looking at. So right now it's looking at project one. If you had another project here underneath, it could switch between those different projects, what it's looking at. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so.
So you could do that either by specifying, no, that's weird, go away. You could do that by what it's looking at, this window operator. You could have that driven by like a table or something. And say you had 3 projects that you wanted to look. I could say exact dimensions, rows 3, columns 1. No, rows 3, columns 1. And I could put my project 1 here. Project 2, project 3, and then have a system that references that here on the window that it's looking at. So maybe you have let's see, how would you do that? You would like a counter maybe and a button. Counter. And let's say on this count, we're going to there's a way to make it loop.
I think I'll just dig around with it. I'm just curious if it was
Yeah.
even, like possible.
So
'Cause
you should be able to like use this counter to specify the row in this table, and have this performance, and send that to something that this performance window is operating. This window here is Instead of just being sent to project 1, it's looking at project 2, project 3, or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you should be able to create a system that does that. And then you could have it driven by a button or different buttons or something like that. Whoops, I just deleted my whole project. There we go. All right, any other questions? The other way you could do it is all in the same project. You could have some sort of switcher here between whatever the out is, so you could have it all in the same project and different things going to the same, subbing in what this output is, going to the output that's being referenced by the project. The downside of doing that is all of your objects in the project would all be running even if you weren't looking at them. So doing it the other way, where you're looking at specific projects, you could, on that same system, not only tell it what project to look at, but like disable those projects that aren't being looked at so that they're not being rendered. See, like here on display on, enable on, I could disable it and it'll turn it off and stop rendering the things inside of it, which could give you a lot more performance because you're not running calculations on things that you're not looking at. All right, other questions? All right, well, I'm gonna wrap this up and I will stick around for those of you who had questions. Anything else? I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording now. Great, well, actually, before I stop recording, let's talk about next week. So next week is our last class before our final. The final is going to be on Wednesday the following week. And I want each of you to present a 5-minute presentation with your final, explaining, how it works, what kind of challenges you had, that kind of thing. I'll email you guys a better description of exactly what I want in that final presentation. But essentially, it's just showing us your final so we all get a look at it. So you can do some share screen. And then I'm going to ask you questions about how it works. The main reason why I'm asking you questions about how it works is because I want to make sure you know what your project is and that you didn't just use code that you found on the internet or just ran through a tutorial that you found on the internet. You can use code that you find on the internet. I would say it needs to be something substantially different than what the tutorial was or what the code was. You can't just turn in somebody else's code. But if you do use code from the internet, you need to understand how that code works. So you really have to break it apart, figure out what each little piece does, such that I can ask you about it and you can tell me how it works. Also such that you know it well enough that you could reproduce it from scratch, because otherwise you really haven't learned anything from it, right? So that's the main thing. And then so by next week, I want to do a lab time in our meeting. We're not going to have any asynchronous lesson for next week. We're just going to have you start on your final project. And I want you to have something sort of substantial done on your project. Doesn't need to be done, doesn't really even need to be half done. It just needs to be enough started that you have something that you can show us saying, this is what I have so far. This is the problems that I'm having, so that I can help you in the class period. We can look at, we can do a lab time and talk about what you're doing. So have something started on your final project for next week, okay? I'm still available the rest of this week and every day but Wednesday. And actually, I guess since we don't really have a lesson to do next week, since we're just doing it on lab time, I should be available before the class as well. I do have a staff meeting from like 12 to usually right before this class. So if you hit me up before class on Wednesday next week, I should be available as well. But you better have already had something started. I don't want you to just say, I need help on Wednesday and you're starting from scratch, okay? So show me something next week. That's going to be it for today. I'm going to stick around for questions. I'm going to stop recording now. All right, I'll see you next week.